Close your eyes. I want to ask you something before we begin tonight. When was the last time you laughed so hard you couldn't breathe? Not a polite laugh. Not the kind you produce in response to something mildly amusing in a meeting. The real kind. The kind that takes over completely, that empties your lungs and requires several attempts to recover from, the kind that leaves you slightly exhausted and entirely, completely happy. Hold that memory for just a moment. Now here is what I want to tell you about that laugh. It is approximately 8 million years old. Not your specific laugh, but the mechanism of it. The neural pathways, the physical response, the involuntary exhalation of breath in a rhythmic pattern triggered by something that the brain registers as safe, and social, and good, that response existed, in something recognizably close to its current form, before our ancestors had split from the ancestors of chimpanzees. Which means that somewhere in a forest in Tanzania tonight, there is a chimpanzee who laughs. Not metaphorically. Not something that merely resembles laughter. Actual laughter. Documented, recorded, spectrographically analyzed, unmistakable laughter. Welcome to Sleepy Wilds. Tonight we are going to follow a chimpanzee community through one long, settling evening in the Gombe stream forest. And along the way, we are going to find out why chimpanzees laugh, what it means, and what it tells us about a question that turns out to be considerably more interesting than it first appears. Let's begin. The Gombe Stream National Park sits on the eastern shore of Lake Tanganyika in western Tanzania, a narrow strip of steep, forested hills dropping down to the lake's edge. It is approximately 52 square kilometers in size. It is most famous for being the place where, in July 1960, a 26-year-old researcher named Jane Goodall first observed a chimpanzee using a grass stem as a tool to extract termites from a termite mound. This observation, subsequently confirmed and expanded over decades of research, fundamentally changed the scientific understanding of what it means to be human. Before Goodall's discovery, the ability to make and use tools was considered one of the defining characteristics separating humans from all other animals. After it, her mentor, the paleoanthropologist Louis Leakey, wrote to her in a now famous note, "Now we must redefine tool, redefine man, or accept chimpanzees as humans." Leakey wrote this in 1960. The chimpanzees of Gombe Stream have been there considerably longer. Tonight, we are joining them as they settle towards sleep in the canopy of that same forest, on a warm evening in the kind of light that forests like this produce at dusk, when the canopy above filters the last of the sun into something green and soft and almost weightless. They have no idea who Jane Goodall is. They are simply having their evening. The community we are following tonight consists of approximately 35 individuals. This is a typical chimpanzee community size. Communities range from roughly 15 to over 150 members, depending on territory size and food availability, with Gombe communities tending toward the smaller end of this range. Within the community, there is a clear social hierarchy. At the top is the alpha male. The alpha male of a chimpanzee community does not hold his position through size alone, though size matters. He holds it through a combination of physical presence, political alliance, and what can only be described as performance, specifically a behavior called a display, in which the alpha male charges through the forest, stamping, swaying branches, and producing a noise level that researchers in the field describe, almost universally, as remarkable. The alpha male of tonight's community is approximately 22 years old. He weighs approximately 50 kilograms. 50 kilograms is roughly half the weight of an average adult human male. He is, despite this, genuinely alarming at full display. He is not currently displaying. He is sitting in a fig tree approximately 8 meters from the ground, eating figs, in the comfortable, focused way that someone eats when they have had a good day and nothing is pressing. He is having a good evening. Before we go any further into the community's evening, let's address the laughter question directly, because it is the reason we are here and it deserves proper attention. When a chimpanzee laughs, it does not sound exactly like human laughter. It is produced differently, for one thing. Human laughter consists of repeated vocalizations on both the inhalation and exhalation of breath. Chimpanzee laughter is produced primarily on exhalation only, giving it a faster, more breathy quality, sometimes described as a panting sound. But when researchers recorded chimpanzee laughter and analyzed it spectrographically, the acoustic signature they found bore a striking resemblance to human laughter in its fundamental structure, its rhythm, its frequency characteristics. And crucially, it was produced in the same contexts. Chimpanzees laugh during play. They laugh when they are tickled, which researchers have confirmed using a protocol that presumably required some courage to design. They laugh in social bonding situations, during grooming, during friendly physical contact. They do not laugh when they are alone. This last point matters. Chimpanzee laughter, like human laughter, is fundamentally social. It is not a response to something funny, exactly. It is a signal. A communication. A way of saying, to another chimpanzee, I am safe, and so are you, and this moment, right now, is good. Here is the part of the laughter story that tends to stop people when they first hear it. Human laughter, chimpanzee laughter, and the laughter of several other great apes, including gorillas and orangutans, all share a common evolutionary ancestor. Which means that laughter, as a social signal, is at least 8 to 10 million years old. 8 to 10 million years. For context, modern humans have existed for approximately 300,000 years. Writing was invented approximately 5,000 years ago. The wheel approximately 6,000 years ago. Laughter predates all of it. Predates language itself, almost certainly, since the neural structures and the social context for laughter appear to have been in place before the emergence of the complex vocal control that language requires. Which means that at some point in the deep past of our species, before anyone had words, before anyone could have explained what was funny or why, something that functioned very much like a laugh was already passing between individuals who were, in some sense, ancestors of both you and the chimpanzee eating figs in a tree in Tanzania this evening. The laugh is older than the joke. It is older, in a sense, than the capacity to understand why something is funny. It was simply there, first, as a sound that meant safe. That meant together. That meant good. The fig tree in which the alpha male is eating is a ficus species, one of approximately 800 species of ficus globally, and one of the most ecologically important trees in the forest. Fig trees produce fruit in overlapping cycles throughout the year, meaning that somewhere in the forest, figs are almost always available, making them one of the most reliable food sources for the Gombe chimpanzees during periods when other fruit is scarce. The figs being eaten tonight are approximately the size of a large grape, pale green, slightly soft, and, based on the speed and focus with which the alpha male is consuming them, apparently excellent. He has eaten approximately 47 figs in the past 22 minutes. This is not unusual. Chimpanzees can consume several kilograms of fruit in a single sitting when high-quality food is available, storing the energy for periods of scarcity in the way that animals with feast and famine food access have evolved to do. Below the alpha male, on lower branches of the same tree, 3 other adult males are also eating figs. The social arrangement is comfortable. No one is displaying. No one is challenging anyone's position. It is, in the language of chimpanzee social life, a peaceful evening, and all 4 of them appear to know it. The forest light is fading around them, the green of the canopy deepening toward the darker green of early evening. Soon, they will build their nests. Nest building. This is something most people do not know chimpanzees do every single night. Not the same nest. A new one. Every night, each individual chimpanzee selects a suitable tree, chooses a branch fork or a stable junction in the canopy, and constructs a fresh sleeping platform from bent and woven branches, lined with softer leaves. The process takes approximately 3 to 5 minutes for an experienced adult. For a young chimpanzee still learning, it can take considerably longer, and the results are, by all accounts, considerably less structurally sound. Each nest is typically used for one night only. Researchers have proposed various explanations for this single-use approach, including parasite avoidance, the accumulated waste products of a night's sleep making reuse unhygienic, and the simple efficiency of always having fresh, clean sleeping materials in a forest that provides them in abundance. What is perhaps most remarkable is the consistency of the behavior. Rain or shine, food scarce or abundant, high in the community's social hierarchy or low, every chimpanzee builds a nest every night. It is the one completely universal behavior in a species that is, in almost every other respect, startlingly varied in its individual habits and preferences. Tonight, as the light continues to fail, they will each build one more. Let's stay with the nest building for a moment, because there is something in it that deserves more attention than it usually gets. A chimpanzee choosing where to build its nest is making a decision. Not a simple reflexive behavior, not an instinctive response triggered by a specific stimulus, but an actual assessment of options, a comparison of alternatives, and a selection based on multiple criteria evaluated simultaneously. Height from the ground, for safety. Branch stability, for structural support. Proximity to other community members, for social comfort. And, researchers have found, something that functions remarkably like aesthetic preference, with individual chimpanzees showing consistent choices that go beyond simple structural requirements, tending to select locations that are, in some measurable sense, more comfortable than strictly necessary for survival. They choose where they want to sleep. They make their bed. Every single night, they make their bed. There is something very quiet and very human about that. Or rather, there is something very chimpanzee about the human habit of it, because the chimpanzees were doing it first. You are lying somewhere right now that you either chose or arranged. The oldest instinct both of you share says, find a good place. Make it comfortable. Settle in. You have both done exactly that tonight. At approximately 5:42 in the evening, the alpha male finished his figs. He sat in the tree for approximately 3 minutes following the last fig, in the particular way that animals sit when they have eaten enough and are deciding what comes next. Then he descended. Not far. Perhaps 2 meters, from one branch to a larger, more comfortable-looking one slightly below and to the left. He settled himself against the trunk of the tree, his back to the bark, his legs extended along the branch. A female chimpanzee, approximately 17 years old, had been sitting on the adjacent branch for the past 20 minutes. The alpha male extended his hand toward her. She moved slightly closer. He began to groom her. Grooming in chimpanzees is not simply hygiene. It is, as researchers have documented extensively, one of the primary currencies of chimpanzee social life. It creates and maintains alliances. It signals trust. It reduces stress hormones in both the groomer and the groomed, measurably, in documented studies. It is also, simply, something that feels good. The female relaxed almost immediately under the alpha male's attention, her posture softening, her breathing slowing. If you have ever had someone absent-mindedly play with your hair, or rub your shoulders without being asked, you have a reasonable approximation of what this moment felt like for her. Here is the fact about chimpanzees that tends to produce the longest pause when people hear it for the first time. Chimpanzees and humans share approximately 98.7% of their DNA. 98.7%. This means that the genetic difference between a human and a chimpanzee is smaller than the genetic difference between a chimpanzee and a gorilla. It means that if you were to sequence the complete genome of the alpha male sitting in the fig tree right now, and compare it, gene by gene, with a randomly selected human being, you would find that 1.3% of the letters are different. 1.3%. What that 1.3% produces, in terms of cognitive complexity, linguistic ability, abstract reasoning, and the capacity to stay awake worrying about things that have not happened yet, is, it must be admitted, quite significant. But 98.7% of what is happening inside the alpha male right now, the chemistry of his digestion, the electrical activity in his neurons, the way his heart is beating, the way his immune system is doing its work, the way sleep, when it comes, will restore and consolidate and repair him. 98.7% of all of that is identical to what is happening inside you. Right now. The same ancient machinery. Running the same ancient program. In the same dark evening. On the same small planet. The grooming continued as the forest light faded around the fig tree. The alpha male worked slowly and methodically, parting the female's fur with careful fingers, removing small pieces of debris, the occasional tick or plant fragment, with the focused, unhurried attention of someone doing a task they have done 10,000 times and expect to do 10,000 more. Chimpanzees spend approximately 20% of their waking time in grooming behavior. 20%. If you spend approximately 16 hours awake each day, 20% of that is approximately 3 hours and 12 minutes. 3 hours and 12 minutes of grooming, every day, for a lifetime. For a chimpanzee living to perhaps 45 or 50 years in the wild, this represents, conservatively, tens of thousands of hours of grooming over the course of a life. This is not wasted time, in any sense that matters. Research by primatologist Robin Dunbar proposed what became known as the social brain hypothesis, the idea that the primate brain evolved not primarily to solve problems of food finding or tool use, but to manage the complexity of social relationships within a group. And grooming, on this account, is not downtime. It is the work. It is how trust is built, alliances maintained, conflicts managed, hierarchies negotiated. It is, in a very real sense, how chimpanzees think together. The alpha male continued. The female remained still. The forest settled slowly into evening. Let your own body settle a little more now, the way the female settled under the alpha male's attention. There is a specific physiological response that humans and chimpanzees share when they receive gentle, consistent physical contact from someone they trust. Oxytocin is released. Cortisol, the primary stress hormone, decreases. Heart rate slows. The nervous system shifts from its alert, ready, prepared for action state toward its resting, restoring, recovering state. This shift does not require physical contact to initiate. It can be initiated by a calm voice in the dark, speaking at a measured pace, about things that are interesting but not urgent. Something very much like this, in other words. Your cortisol is lower than it was when this story began. Your heart rate has slowed, almost certainly, from its pre-listening level. Your nervous system is doing, right now, something very close to what the female chimpanzee's nervous system is doing in the fig tree in Tanzania. Moving from alert to resting. From ready to released. From the posture of the day toward the posture of the night. You do not need to manage this transition. It is already well underway. Approximately 30 meters from the fig tree, two juvenile chimpanzees, brothers, one approximately 7 years old and one approximately 4, were engaged in what had been a continuous play session for the past 40 minutes. The play involved a considerable amount of chasing, a considerable amount of wrestling, at least 3 instances of one brother sitting on the other brother's head, and a sequence of events near the base of a large tree that was difficult to follow precisely but appeared to involve some disagreement about a stick that neither of them seemed particularly interested in before the disagreement began. They were also laughing. Not occasionally. Continuously, in the breathy, panting, exhalation-focused way of chimpanzee laughter, punctuated by pauses to recover breath before resuming both the wrestling and the laughing. Researchers studying chimpanzee play have found that laughter in play serves a specific communicative function beyond simply expressing enjoyment. It signals to the other party that this is play. That the wrestling is not aggression. That the sitting on the head is not an attack. That whatever is happening, it is safe, it is shared, and it should continue. The laughter is, in this context, a running reassurance. A continuous, breathless reminder that everything is fine. Which is, when you think about it, one of the nicest things one animal can communicate to another. Everything is fine. This is play. Keep going. The older brother eventually ended the play session in the way that play sessions between siblings of different ages typically end, which is to say that the younger one pushed his luck approximately once too often, the older one decided he had had enough, and the younger one sat at a small distance making a sound that, in human terms, would be best described as pouting. The pouting lasted approximately 3 minutes. Then the younger brother approached the older one, reached out, and gently touched him on the shoulder. The older brother looked at him for a moment. Then he began grooming him. The reconciliation took about 90 seconds. This is worth noting because reconciliation behavior in chimpanzees, the post-conflict re-establishment of peaceful contact, was for a long time not expected to exist in non-human primates. The assumption was that animals lacked the social and cognitive architecture required for something as sophisticated as making up. Franz de Waal, the primatologist who first systematically documented reconciliation in chimpanzees in the 1970s and 80s, described the initial response from colleagues as skeptical, to put it generously. The chimpanzees, for their part, continued making up after conflicts without waiting for scientific consensus on whether they were doing it. The younger brother settled under his older brother's grooming, the pouting expression replaced, gradually, by the relaxed, eyes half-closed look of someone receiving exactly what they needed. There is something in that reconciliation worth sitting with tonight. The younger brother did not wait for an apology. He simply approached, and offered contact, and received it. Whatever the conflict had been, whatever the small grievance of the stick or the wrestling or the sitting on the head, it was not held on to longer than it needed to be held. The approach was made. The contact was offered and accepted. And then both of them simply continued, in the same tree, on the same branch, in the same forest, as if the disruption had simply passed through them and left no lasting trace. You do not need to resolve everything tonight. Whatever is unresolved can remain unresolved until morning, at which point it will almost certainly look smaller, the way most things look smaller after sleep, having been processed and sorted by a brain that does some of its best work while you are not consciously involved. The younger brother was asleep against his older brother's shoulder within approximately 20 minutes. He did not stay awake worrying about the stick. The stick was in a tree somewhere. It had never been worth worrying about. He slept. Across the community, as the forest light faded to gray and then to the softer dark of early evening, the nightly process of finding sleeping sites had begun. Chimpanzees do not all sleep together in a single location. They disperse. Each individual, or each small subgroup, moves to a chosen tree, builds a nest, and settles for the night. This dispersal is itself a form of safety, distributing the community across a wider area rather than concentrating vulnerability in a single spot. But within it, there are patterns of preference. Mothers sleep near their young offspring, obviously. Close allies, pairs of males who have formed strong social bonds, sometimes build their nests in adjacent trees, close enough to hear each other, close enough that the simple proximity provides something the research literature describes, carefully, as social comfort. Which is a scientific way of saying they like sleeping near their friends. Most social animals do. You may be sleeping near someone tonight, or in the knowledge that someone is nearby, and there is, in that proximity, a very old and very reliable form of safety signal being registered by a part of your brain that is, in this specific respect, 98.7% chimpanzee. The community dispersed through the darkening trees. Nests were being built. Let's talk about what happens inside a chimpanzee's brain during sleep, because it turns out to be considerably more interesting than most people expect. Chimpanzees experience sleep stages recognizably similar to human sleep stages, including slow-wave deep sleep, in which the brain produces the large, slow electrical oscillations associated with physical restoration and memory consolidation, and REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, in which brain activity increases markedly and dreaming, in humans, typically occurs. Whether chimpanzees dream is not something that can currently be confirmed or denied. What can be confirmed is that during REM sleep, chimpanzees show the same characteristic rapid eye movements under closed lids that humans show during dreaming sleep. Their faces sometimes move. Their hands sometimes twitch. Occasionally, they make quiet vocalizations. What they are experiencing during these moments, if they are experiencing anything that could be called experience in the way we mean the word, is not something science can currently answer. But the machinery is the same. The brain cycling through its nightly maintenance routine, consolidating the day's learning, processing social information, restoring the systems that running a complex social life has depleted. Your own brain is preparing to do exactly this. Slow-wave sleep, then REM, then slow-wave again, cycling through the night, doing the work that can only be done when you are out of the way. Let it get started. The alpha male had moved from the fig tree. He chose a tall pterocarpus tree approximately 60 meters away, ascending to approximately 12 meters before selecting a branch fork that looked, to his experienced assessment, suitable. The nest building took 3 minutes and 40 seconds. He bent 4 primary branches inward, folding them to create the structural base. He added a layer of smaller leafy branches. He added a final layer of the softest available leaves. He tested it, settling his weight into it and shifting slightly to find the most comfortable arrangement, in exactly the way a human might adjust a pillow before concluding that yes, this will do. It would do. He settled. Below him, the forest continued its evening transition, the sounds of the day, the calls and rustles and movement of dozens of species, gradually giving way to the sounds of the night, a different register, slower, more widely spaced, the forest's nighttime mode. The alpha male closed his eyes. Not all the way, initially. One eye remained partly open, registering the darkening forest around him with the low-level alertness of a large animal at the top of its social hierarchy, who has survived to alpha status precisely by not dropping his guard completely at any moment. Then, gradually, that eye closed too. He slept. Jane Goodall spent approximately 55 years studying the chimpanzees of Gombe. Not continuously, and not always in the forest herself in later decades. But the research station she established in 1960 continues to operate today, the longest-running continuous wildlife study in history, its data spanning multiple generations of chimpanzees and providing a longitudinal view of chimpanzee life that is available for no other wild animal population. Some of the chimpanzees alive in Gombe today are the grandchildren, or great-grandchildren, of individuals Goodall first encountered and named in the 1960s. She named them because she found that naming helped her remember them as individuals, helped her track their distinctive personalities, helped her see them as what they were rather than as interchangeable instances of a species. The scientific convention of the time discouraged this, insisting that animal subjects should be numbered rather than named to avoid anthropomorphism, the projection of human qualities onto non-human subjects. Goodall named them anyway. And the subsequent 55 years of data generated by researchers who could see, because of those names, that these were individuals with histories and relationships and personalities, transformed our understanding of what intelligence and social life and emotion actually mean. The alpha male in the Pterocarpus tree has a name in the research records. We will not use it tonight, because this is his night, not his record. But he has one. He is known. He is, in the truest sense, an individual. The community had largely settled by the time full darkness came. Nests built, occupied, their inhabitants arranged in whatever position experience and preference had taught each individual was most comfortable. The two brothers, reconciled fully now, had built adjacent nests in the same tree, close enough that they could hear each other breathe. The female the alpha male had groomed had built her nest in a tree approximately 20 meters from his, close enough for social comfort, independent enough for her own. A mother with a 1-year-old infant had her infant tucked against her in the nest, the infant's arms wrapped around her, the way infant primates sleep, in close contact with warmth and heartbeat and the smell of their mother, the combination of which produces, in infant chimpanzees as in infant humans, the most reliable sleep of any they will experience in their lives. The forest was quiet now in the particular way that forests become quiet after full dark, the daytime sounds replaced by the nighttime sounds, each occupying a different acoustic space. And in 12 different trees across the community's sleeping area, 35 chimpanzees were doing what you are doing right now. Settling. Breathing slowly. Letting the day release them. The forest held them as it held everything, gently, completely, without requiring anything of them in return. And it holds you too, in whatever version of forest you carry with you into the dark. Let it. The forest at night is not silent. This is one of the things that surprises people who have not spent time in a tropical forest after dark. The expectation is quiet, the daytime sounds have stopped, the birds have settled, the chattering and calling of the canopy have dropped away, and this is true. But silence is not what replaces them. What replaces them is a different register of sound entirely. The nighttime insects, species that spend the daylight hours dormant and emerge precisely as the light fails, fill the forest with a continuous, layered, complex sound that is, if anything, denser than the daytime sounds, simply lower in frequency and more uniform in character. Beneath this, in the distance, Lake Tanganyika makes its own sound, a low, slow wash of water that travels through the forest as something felt as much as heard, a deep background presence. And above all of it, occasionally, the forest itself makes sounds that have no clear biological source, the settling of wood, the movement of air through high branches, the sound of something very large and very old simply existing. The chimpanzees sleep through most of this without stirring. They have slept through these sounds every night of their lives. The sounds are not alarming. The sounds are home. Let the sounds of wherever you are right now become home in the same way tonight. Not alarming. Simply the sound of the place you are in, being itself, continuing, as it always does, while you rest within it. At some point in the deep middle of the night, the alpha male shifted in his nest. Not woke. Not fully. A partial arousal, the kind that happens multiple times in any night's sleep for most mammals, a brief surfacing from deep sleep to lighter sleep, a momentary increase in awareness of the environment, and then a return to depth. In humans, these partial arousals happen on average every 90 minutes or so, corresponding roughly to the boundary between sleep cycles, and most people experience them without ever becoming conscious enough to remember them in the morning. The alpha male's partial arousal lasted approximately 45 seconds. He registered the forest sounds, found them within the expected range, made no assessment that required action. His eyes opened to approximately 10% for approximately 5 seconds. Then they closed again. He returned to deep sleep within approximately 2 minutes. The nest held him. The branch held the nest. The tree held the branch. The forest held everything. He had nothing to do except allow this chain of holding to continue, which it did, as it had every night of his 22 years, without requiring any effort from him beyond the simple willingness to remain where he was. You are similarly held tonight. By layers of support you are not required to be aware of. Simply allow it to continue. Here is something about chimpanzees that tends to produce a particular kind of quiet when people hear it. Chimpanzees form friendships. Not alliances, which are strategic, calculated, and shift with circumstances. Friendships. Long-term, consistent, preferential social bonds with specific individuals that persist over years and decades, that involve seeking out the other individual's company even when there is no strategic benefit to doing so, that involve spending time together simply because the time is better spent together than apart. Research tracking chimpanzee social bonds over multiple years has found that these friendships show the same characteristics as human friendship in multiple measurable ways, including consistent mutual grooming, proximity preference, and what researchers describe as social support during stressful events, the tendency to seek out or remain near a friend when something threatening or uncertain is happening. The alpha male has 2 such friends. Both are adult males, slightly younger than him. One of them is sleeping approximately 30 meters away in a ficus tree, his nest built as it has been built for the past 6 years, within hearing distance of the alpha male's chosen tree. Neither of them would describe this arrangement in any terms at all. But the arrangement has been consistent for 6 years. And there is, in that consistency, something that requires no description to be understood. Let the idea of that friendship settle for a moment before we move on. A 22-year-old chimpanzee and his friend of 6 years, sleeping in adjacent trees in a forest in Tanzania, 30 meters apart, close enough to hear the other breathe. There is something in that image that is very old and very recognizable. The specific desire to be near the people you are easy with. The particular quality of rest that proximity to trusted companions makes possible. You may have something like that in your life. Someone whose simple presence in the same building, or the same room, or the same approximate time zone, makes the night feel a different kind of safe than it feels without them. Or a memory of such a presence, which can work in its own way almost as well, the brain not always distinguishing clearly between the actual presence of safety and the remembered feeling of it. Let whatever version of that you have access to tonight be with you now. The alpha male is 30 meters from his friend. You are wherever you are. Both of those distances are fine. Both of those arrangements are enough. The forest holds the distance between the two friends as easily as it holds everything else. The younger of the two brothers woke at some point in the night. Not from a noise. Not from anything externally identifiable. He simply woke, the way young animals sometimes do, surfacing fully from sleep to complete alertness in the short, immediate way that prey-adjacent nervous systems are designed to do, the way his own nervous system had been designed by evolutionary pressure long before anyone had established whether chimpanzees were prey or not. He looked around. His older brother's nest was approximately 2 meters away, visible in the forest dark as a shape, a slight disruption in the pattern of branches, occupied and still. The younger brother listened. The forest sounds continued at their expected level. Nothing was different from how it had been when he fell asleep. Nothing in the sound register suggested anything requiring response. He lay back down. He rearranged himself once, pulling a loose branch back into position beneath his hip, the nest having settled slightly under his weight during the night. Then he was still. And within approximately 4 minutes, he was asleep again. Not because he made any effort to sleep. Simply because the conditions were right, and the assessment had been made, and there was nothing left to do except allow his nervous system to return to what it had been doing before it briefly interrupted itself. The conditions are right for you too. The assessment has been made. There is nothing left to do. Here is a fact about chimpanzee cognition that took decades of careful research to establish and that still, when stated plainly, sounds somewhat astonishing. Chimpanzees understand death. Not in the abstract, philosophical sense that humans understand it, the ability to contemplate mortality as a concept independent of immediate experience. But in the direct, experiential sense of recognizing that a specific individual they knew is gone, that the absence is permanent, and that something about that permanence is significant. Research documenting chimpanzee responses to the deaths of community members, and particularly of close family members, has recorded behaviors including extended periods of reduced activity, loss of appetite, and what appears, in the most careful and conservative language researchers can manage, to be grief. Mothers have been documented carrying deceased infants for days. Community members have been observed returning to the area where a companion died and appearing, by behavioral measures, to be doing something recognizable as processing the loss. The alpha male lost his mother 3 years ago. She was the oldest female in the community. He spent 2 days near her body after she died. He does not think about this tonight, in any sense that can be confirmed. But she is part of the structure of who he is, the way any long, important relationship becomes part of the structure of a person, or a chimpanzee, after enough years. He carries her, the way everyone carries those they have lost. Simply, and continuously, and without having to think about it. The night had reached its deepest point now, the particular quality of darkness and quiet that belongs to the hours between roughly 2 and 4 in the morning, when the previous day has completely finished and the next one has not yet begun to think about starting. The forest sounds continued at their established level. The insects, the lake, the slow breathing of trees. In 12 different trees, 35 chimpanzees continued their sleep. The alpha male's breathing was slow and even, 4 to 6 breaths per minute in deep sleep, his large hands relaxed against the nest, his face calm in the darkness. The two brothers lay in their adjacent nests, the older one on his back, the younger curled on his side facing his brother's tree, both of them entirely still. The female who had been groomed earlier in the evening was deep in sleep, her breathing slower than it had been all day, her body doing the restorative work that sleep exists to accomplish, rebuilding what the day's social complexity, its negotiations and calculations and small conflicts and reconciliations, had depleted. And somewhere in 30 meters of dark forest air, between the alpha male's tree and his friend's tree, the night continued its patient, unhurried passage through the hours. Nothing was required of any of them. They simply slept. If you are still here with the chimpanzees at this hour, something has happened to your awareness since the story began. The details that seemed like information in the early parts, the percentages, the species names, the specific measurements, have probably stopped being details you are tracking and started being simply the texture of a voice in the dark, telling you things at a pace slow enough to follow without effort. This is what stories are for, at their most fundamental level. Not to inform, exactly, though good ones do. But to give the mind something to move through slowly, a landscape with enough interest to keep the conscious attention gently occupied, while the deeper parts of the brain begin the slow, patient process of releasing the day. You have been in that process for some time now. The releasing has been happening, quietly and without your involvement, while you followed the alpha male to the fig tree and the two brothers through their play and their reconciliation and the female settling under the grooming she needed. There is very little left of whatever the day put into you to release. Just a little more. And then simply sleep. The chimpanzees are already there. They have been there for hours. The pre-dawn period in the Gombe forest begins approximately 45 minutes before sunrise, when the first species of bird, those sensitive enough to detect the change in light that precedes any visible change in the sky, begin their morning chorus. This first calling is not yet happening. That is still some time away. But the deep, complete dark of the middle of the night has begun, very faintly, to soften at its edges, in a way that only the most attentive instruments would currently detect, and which the chimpanzees, asleep in their nests, do not yet register. Sleep continues. The alpha male has been asleep for approximately 6 hours. Chimpanzees typically sleep between 8 and 10 hours per night, making them, in terms of sleep duration, considerably closer to the human ideal than most humans actually manage. He has 2 to 4 hours still ahead of him before the morning calling of the forest begins to filter into his sleep and nudge him, gradually, toward waking. He is in no hurry toward it. The nest is comfortable. The forest is quiet. The friend in the adjacent tree is sleeping. There is nothing to wake for yet. Nothing to prepare for. Nothing to anticipate. Simply the continuing dark, and the continuing quiet, and the completely sufficient experience of being a 22-year-old chimpanzee in a nest in a forest, asleep, while the planet completes another slow turn toward morning. We will leave the chimpanzees here, in the deep, quiet dark of the Gombe forest, each one asleep in their chosen tree, the community scattered and yet connected across the darkness by proximity and familiarity and the simple, ancient fact of having spent their lives together. You have spent this evening with them, following the laughter back to its source, 8 to 10 million years of shared history between the sound a chimpanzee makes in play and the sound you make when something is genuinely, helplessly funny. You have followed the alpha male to his figs and his grooming and his nest, the female to her evening and her rest, the two brothers through their conflict and their reconciliation and their sleep in adjacent trees, close enough to hear each other breathe. And somewhere in all of it, I hope, you have found your own version of the nest. The chosen place. The comfortable arrangement. The proximity of whatever or whoever makes the night feel its specific kind of safe. The forest is holding 35 chimpanzees tonight. The night is holding everything else, including you. You have laughed with creatures who were laughing before our species existed. You have built your own version of tonight's nest. Now sleep in it. Completely. Without reservation. The way the younger brother sleeps against his older brother's tree. Trusting fully in the simple, sufficient fact of having somewhere safe to be. Sleep well. Good night from Sleepy Wilds. The forest holds the chimpanzees. And the night holds you.